हरिः ओम् नमः सर्वेभ्यः। अष्टाध्यायी परिचयः इत्यस्य अद्य 22 पाठः। पूर्वस्मिन् पाठे अस्माभिः शिक्षाशास्त्रात् व्याकरणशास्त्रे स्वीकृताः संज्ञाः का तासाम् अध्ययनं कृतम्। अद्य व्याकरणशास्त्रे विशेषरूपेण उक्ताः वर्णसंज्ञाः काः तासां संक्षेपेण सूत्रैः सह अध्ययनं कुर्मः। शुक्लांबरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। येनाक्षरसमाम्नायमधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। वाक्यकारं वररुचिं भाष्यकारं पतञ्जलिं पाणिनिं सूत्रकारं च प्रणतोऽस्मि मुनित्रयम्। अस्माकं वर्गस्य द्वे प्रयोजने अष्टाध्याय्याः आहत्य 400 सूत्राणां व्याख्यासहितम् उदाहरणसहितं च अध्ययनं तथा च अष्टाध्याय्याः प्रथमाध्यायस्य प्रथमपादस्य कण्ठस्थीकरणम्. So we have completed 11 sutras out of these 400. 400 is the minimum number. We are going to probably go beyond that. But I have shared this sheet for the sutras. I have actually updated it for all the sutras that we will study in each class in this entire module. First 11 sutras शिक्षाशास्त्रात् स्वीकृताः वर्णसंज्ञाः इत्येतेषां विषये विद्यमानाः एताः संज्ञाः अस्माभिः पूर्वस्मिन् वर्गे अधीताः। अद्य अग्रे सरामः। So in today's class the topic is व्याकरणशास्त्र विशिष्टाः वर्णसंज्ञाः and these are the samnyas that we are going to study. T samnya, upadha samnya, vriddhi samnya, guna samnya, samprasarana samnya, sankhya samnya, shat samnya. Out of these, all these are actually not varna samnya, but the majority are varna samnya. So I have given the name to the class as the varna samnya. So T is the samnya given to a varna samuha, a group of letters is called T. Upadha, Vriddhi, Guna and Samprasaranam are actually Varna Samnyaha given to individual letters. And then Sankhya and Shat are actually the Samnyas given to certain words. So Shabdanam, Pratipratikanam, Etaha Samnyaha, Dattaha, Vartante. Let's see, we'll start 12th Sutra of our course. Achontyadi. This sutram defines a specific term called T which is used in Vyakarana Shastra. The commentary says, Acham madhye yontyaha saha adihi yasya tat tisamyam syat. Let's first understand the meaning in the simple language. For most of the sutras where you do not have sufficient background, I'm going to give you the meaning of the sutras in simple language first, and then we are going to talk about Padacheda, Uddesha, Vidheya, other Shastra Vishayas, and so on. So this particular sutram, it gives the samnya called T. And what is T? You take any word, you look at the swaras present in that word, not the vyanjanas, just the swaras. Look at the last swara in that word and start counting, or basically take all the letters starting from that last swara all the way till the end. So for example, if you have the word called Bhavan, then the last swara in this word Bhavan is A. So you take that A and take everything else in that word after A. So essentially you take the An part, that is called T. So Shabdasya Antima Achvarnat Arabhya. Shabdasya Antimam Varnam Yavat. ये केपि वर्णाः विद्यन्ते सः अंशः सः समूहः टी इति संज्ञया व्याकरणे स्वीकृतः अस्ति. सो तस्य अंशस्य टी इति संज्ञा भवति. सो एग्जाम्पल इज भवान इत्यत्र आन इति टी संज्ञकः. If it is an ajanta word like rameshu, then obviously the last swara is u and then there is nothing after it. So you just take that swara and don't take anything else. So rameshu ityatra u iti ti samnyakaha. If there is a visarga or if there is an anuswara, then obviously these are to be taken along with the swara that is actually at the end. सो गुरुः इत्यत्र उः इति टी संज्ञकः। अनेन प्रकारेण शब्दस्य अंतिम अच् वर्णात् आरभ्य अंतिमं वर्णं यावत् विद्यमानः यः अंशः तस्य टी इति संज्ञा भवति। So that's what the sutra says. Achaha antyadi ti. Let's see the padacheda. Achaha is shashti ekvachanam. Antyadi is prathama ekvachanam. And ti is again prathama ekvachanam. What is the uddeshya? What is the sammi? Achaha antyadi. The last swara and the set of letters after that. This is already known to us. We can see that in the given word. So that is the sammi, that is the uddeshyam. And the vidheyam is the samnya, which is ti. So achaha antyadi iti sammi, ti iti samnya. Now let's understand what this achaha antyadi actually means. There are two words. Achaha is in shashti ekvachanam, antyadi is in prathama ekvachanam. Achaha over here is nirdharana shashti. What is nirdharana shashti? It is a special type of shashti which is used to indicate the concept of one amongst many. So, for example, Pandavanam Arjunaha. You can also say Pandaveshu Arjunaha, but saying Pandavanam Arjunaha is also acceptable. This kind of Shashti, where we are saying out of so many Pandavas, this is the Arjuna. This Shashti allows us to select one member from the group. This process is called Nirdharanam. And the Shashti that allows us to do that is called Nirdharana Shashti. In the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, there are so many examples of Nirdharana Shashti one after the other. Adityanam Aham Vishnuhu Jyotisham Raviramshuman Marichir Marutam Asmi. What fourth line? I don't remember now. Nakshatranam Aham Shashi. So Nakshatranam Shashi. Out of all the nakshatras, I am the Chandra. Or Marutam Marichihi. Out of all the Maruts, I am Marichihi. Adityanam aham Vishnu. Out of all the Adityas, I am the Vishnu. So one among the many. Sarvesham achvarnana madhye ekaha. So that is indicated by achaha. And the next word antyadihi says antyaha adihi yasya. This is a bahuvrihi samasa. Antyaha ityukte ante vidyamanaha. The last one. So ante vidyamanaha. This antyaha word, even though it is in the samasa, it has to be combined with achaha. So achaha antyaha. सर्वेषाम अच्वर्णानां मध्ये यः अन्त्यः अस्ति, सर्वेषाम अच्वर्णानां समूहे यः अन्त्यस्थानं प्राप्नोति, सः अन्त्यः अच् आदिः यस्य. यस्य वर्णसमुदायस्य आदौ अन्त्यः अच् स्थितः अस्ति, तादृशः वर्णसमुदायः टी इति नाम्ना ज्ञायते. So that's the whole meaning of this achaha antyadi. Antyaha means ante vidyamanaha. So achaha antya means amongst the all ach letters, whosoever is present at the end. So ach varneshu ante vidyamanaha. तस्मिंश्चित् अपि शब्दे ये सर्वे स्वराः सन्ति तेषु अन्तिमः स्वरः, and that swaraha adihi yasya. That swara is now going to be the first one of the entire set. So achaha antyaha adihi yasya. Saha antima swaraha adihi yasya varna samuhasya. Saha varna samuhaha ti iti samyaya nirdishyate. So that's exactly what the sutrartha also says. Acham madhye yaha antyaha saha adihi yasya tat ti samyam syat. So that's the definition of the term called ti in the Vyakarana Shastra. it is a meaningless word, in the sense it doesn't have a meaning in the language. It is just used for indicating a specific set of letters, because these kind of letters will have some work at certain steps in the prakriya. So tip pradeshaha bhasyater lopaha ityevam adayah. So this is a sample usage. Now you can see over here the T samnyaka is undergoing a lopa by this sutram for some reason, for some prakriya in some context. But such kind of uh, karyas like adeshas, agamas, lopa, and so on is done on the T samnyaka letter in certain sutras. In order to facilitate that explanation, the T samnya is defined all the way in 1.1. So, achontyadi T. That's all about the T samnya. Any questions? You can raise your hands. No questions. Agre gacchamaha. The immediate next sutram. So you saw 1164, achontyaditi. The immediate next sutram, 1165, alontyat purva upadha. Simple sutram. Alontyat purva. Whatever is the last letter. Now don't think whether it is a swara or a vyanjana or whatever. Whatever is the last letter, the one before that is called upadha. So if the last letter is a swara, usually the one before that will be vyanjana. If the last letter is vyanjana, the one before that will most likely be swara. So shabdasya antima varnat purvam vidyamanaha varnaha upadha samnyakaha bhavati. So antima varna is called antya, and the one before that is called upadha. So bhavan ityatra antimaha varnaha na, tasmat purvam vidyamanaha a ayam upadha samnyakaha. रामेषु इत्यत्र अंतिमः वर्णः उ, तस्मात् पूर्वं विद्यमानः श अयम् उपधा सम्यकः. गुरुः इत्यत्र अंतिमः वर्णः विसर्गः, तस्मात् पूर्वं विद्यमानः उ, सः उपधा सम्यकः. In this way, the second last letter is called upadha. The sutra is alontyat purva upadha, alah antyat purvaha upadha. Four terms are there. Chatushpadatmakam sutram. Alaha iti panchami ekvachanam. Antyat iti api panchami ekvachanam. Purvaha iti prathama ekvachanam. Upadha iti prathama ekvachanam. So alaha antyat purvaha, that becomes our samni, that becomes our uddesham. Upadha, that becomes our vidheyam. The sutra is very simple. Antyat alaha. Al means any letter. Al is a pratyahara generated by a of I una all the way till hal. So la of the hal. So all the way starting from the first letter to the last itsamyaka letter, everything is included. So all the swaras, all the vyanjanas are included. Antyat alaha purvaha. So any letter that occurs at the end, tasmat purvaha iti ashayah. Antyat alaha purvaha. So antyat alaha, yaha antimaha varnaha, tasmat purvam vidyamanaha iti atra ashayah. And why is panchami used over here? Dishavachaka shabdat panchami vibhakti bhavati. So we say gramat purvam or say nagarat purvam. In the similarly kalavachaka shabdat abhi panchami eva bhavati. Atah atra, but in this particular case it is dishavachaka because we are talking about the letter that occurs before the end letter. So antyat alaha ityatra purvaha ityasya सामर्थ्यात् पंचमी विभक्ति कृता अस्ति. सो दिशावाचक शब्दात् पंचमी विभक्ति भवति, अतः पूर्व इत्यस्य योगे विद्यमानः अन्त्यात् अलः इति पंचम्यन्त प्रयोगः अस्ति. Now there is one small caveat over here. All that we are saying is antyat alaha purvaha. Antyat alaha purvaha. Purvaha kaha iti nochate. The last letter is antyat alaha. Tasmat purvaha. So the one before that. So antyat alaha purvaha. Who should be that purva? By common sense, that also should be another letter. So even though it is not explicitly told in the sutram, we are talking about the previous member from a letter. So that member is also considered as letter. So यद्यपि पूर्वः कः इति सूत्रे न उक्तम, तथापि संदर्भवशात् पूर्वः इत्यनेन अपि अल् एव गृह्यते. पूर्वः अल् इत्युक्ते पूर्वः, टाइपिंग मिस्टेक ओवर हियर, पूर्वः अल् इत्युक्ते पूर्वः वर्णः. So the entire sutra now becomes अन्त्यात् अलः पूर्वः यः अल् सः उपधा सम्यकः. यः वर्णः अंतिम वर्णात् पूर्वं विद्यते सः उपधा नाम्ना ज्ञायते इति अर्थः. And just like the way T upadha is also used in various sutras, Ata upadhayaha is an example. Upadha pradeshaha, Ata upadhayaha, ityevam adayaha. So that completes the discussion of the upadha samnya. There is a question over here. Guruhu ityatra visargah asti saha api al ityasmin pratyahare gryhyate va iti prashnah. So technically the answer is yes. Ayoga vahanam api atsugrahanam krutam asti. So this is a little bit advanced siddhanta. We will not go in it, but simple answer, ayoga vahas are also considered inside Shiva Sutras, even though they are explicitly not mentioned. So that is the reason why in Guruhu you can take U as the Upadha. However, there is also another dimension to it. The example that I have given over here, Guruhu ityatra U iti Upadha samyakaha, is quite hypothetical. In the Vyakarana Shastra, in the Prakriya, you do not have any need of finding Upadha when Visarga is at the end. Basically, all these Sannyas are created for using in other sutras. If no sutra requires any concept, then it is not needed to be defined as a samnya. So the upadha samnya that is defined in this particular sutram is used in other places in Ashtadhyayi, specifically when there is either a vyanjana or a swara at the end. Having an visarga at the end is a rare possibility, and such a case is not needed for the upadha samnya anywhere in other sutras of Ashtadhyayi. So you can directly omit this example also, but just for the sake of completeness, I have given this example, and the visarga, even the anuswara, even the upadmanya, jivva, mulya, and so on are considered part of at pratyahara, at sugrahanam iti uchyate. But you can keep that aside. In simple language, the al pratyahara is supposed to contain all these. Any other questions? Agri gacchamaha. The next sutram and the very first sutram of Ashtadhyayi, Vriddhiradaich anena Vriddhihi iti samnya pathyate. So let's take a stock of the things. We studied achontyadi T, so that's the T samnya. We talked about alontyat purva upadha, so that's the upadha samnya. And now we are going to talk about the first and the second sutra of Ashtadhyayi, Vriddhiradaich, that gives Vriddhi samnya, and adeng gunaha, that gives guna samnya. So the first sutram, Vriddhiradaich, Prathamadhyaya se Prathamapadasya Prathamam sutram, Vriddhiradaich, Adaich, Vriddhi samnya syat. So Adaich, this entity is called Vriddhi in Vyakarana Shastra. What is Adaich? We will break that samasa and understand the meanings, but let's understand the sutrartha first. The dirgha avarna, which is basically all types of akaras, dirgha avarna, dirgha ai varna. So you keep pluta aside, just take dirgha. Rasva just doesn't exist, pluta is to be kept aside. Dirgha ai varna, tathacha dirgha au varna. So essentially a, I and au. These three letters are called Vriddhi in Vyakarana Shastra. So the sutra Vriddhiradaich, The padacheda is Vriddhi and Adaich. Now here the samjna, which is Vriddhi, is kept first. In all the sutras that we have seen so far, the samjna was kept later on, the sammi was kept first. Halo nantara sanyogaha, mukhanasika vachano nunasikaha. Or just now we saw the two sutras, achontyadi ti, alontyad purva upadha. The samni is always kept first, the samjna is kept later on. You see, all other sutras that we are going to study today, adeng gunaha, igyanaha samprasaranam, bahuganavatulati sankhya, shnanta shat. Everywhere the samni is kept first, the samjna is kept later on. Vriddhi Radhich is one of the very handful of exceptions where the reverse of ordering is used. The samjna Vriddhi is kept first, sammi Adaich is kept later on. The reason given by the scholars, given by the Vaiyakarnas, is Mangala Charanartham. Typically, any grantha begins with a Mangala Charanam. Mangaladini, Mangalamadhyani, Mangalantani cha Shastrani prathante. Prathante means prosper. For a Shastra to prosper, it must start with a Mangalacharanam. It must have a Mangalacharanam in the middle and it must have a Mangalacharan towards the end. So Mangaladini, Mangalamadhyani, Mangalantani cha Shastrani prathante. Now here Panini Maharshi wants to do Alpaksharatvam. So he doesn't waste letters in the beginning for doing Mangalacharanam like Tasmai Shivaya Namaha and so on. He won't say anything like that. He just starts his Sutra Patha with a word that indicates prosperity, which is one form of Mangalacharanam. So Vriddhihi iti shabdaha yaha वृद्धिम दर्शयति, ग्रोथ, इट शोज प्रॉस्पेरिटी. यहाँ मांगल्यम दर्शयति. सः शब्दः सूत्रपाठस्य आरंभे पाणिनि महर्षिभिः स्थापितः अस्ति. अयं शब्दः व्याकरणशास्त्रे संज्ञारूपेण कार्यं करोति. तस्मिन्नेव समये सूत्रपाठस्य कृते मंगलाचरणस्य अपि कार्यं करोति. So Vriddhi is used for Mangalacharanam, and therefore instead of saying Adaich Vriddhi, Panini Maharshi takes an exception and he says Vriddhihi Adaich. So Vriddhi is the samnya, Adaich is the samni, and let's look at this word Adaich. Adaich is the samasta padam at plus aich. At ch aich ch iti adaich. So it is a dvandva samasa, at plus aich. Aich is essentially aich pratyahara, which contains only two letters, I and au. So aong and I ouch. So that I and ch combined together, which contains I and au. So aich pratyahara includes I and au, and at indicates akaraha. So at इत्यनेन आ इति वर्णः गृह्यते. ऐच् इत्यनेन ऐ तथा औ इति द्वौ वर्णौ गृह्येते. In this particular way, we have three varnas, a, ai, and au, along with their udatta, anudatta, swarita, anunasika, anunasika. All the bhedas are included, but we are keeping them aside. I mentioned that in one of the earlier classes as well. For now, let's focus on Rasva, Dirgha, Pluta Bhedas. So out of that, the Rasva and the Pluta Bhedas are not being used over here. I'll explain the reason why. Only the A, Dirgha and Aich, which includes I and Au, both Dirgha are included. So in this way, A, I and Au, the three Varnas get the Samnya called Vriddhi. And why is the Pluta Bheda not included? It is because of this mysterious takara that is used. Remember one of our earlier discussions, takara is used for blocking or limiting the savarna grahanam. So this process is called taparakaranam, and this takara can either be present before or it can be present after. So tat paraha yasmat saha, no chet ta paraha yasmat. sorry, tat paraha yaha saha, no chet ta paraha yasmat saha. So when you take this configuration called adayich, this ta in the actual word called adayich, this ta is sandwiched between a on one side and aich on the other side. So you have a, then you have ta, and then you have aich, and therefore it is theoretically possible for this ta to do a taparakaranam on a, and also for this ta to do a taparakaranam on aich. However, the taparakaranam on a is not required. Why? Because taparakaranam is only used to block or restrict the savarna grahanam, and savarna grahanam is never done by dirgha akara. Remember, I have already taught you this. When you have Hraswa, Dirgha and Pluta, the Savarna Grahanam can only be done by Hraswa. I gave you an analogy of a train with an engine and compartments. Hopefully, you remember that. So, when there is a Varna, because it exists in three flavors A, and A, Pluta, only the A Varna, which is the Hraswa, can do the Savarna Grahanam, and therefore saying a ta with a takara on an a makes sense, but a takara on a does not make sense because it is not going to block a non-existing savarna grahanam. Therefore, there is no point in having the ta in context of a, but ta in context of aich can definitely make sense because aich contains I and au. Both of them can do savarna grahanam because I and au come only in two flavors, dirgha and pluta, and therefore dirgha is likely to do the savarna grahanam, and that savarna grahanam is being restricted by this taparakaranam. Therefore, at aich ityatra vidyamanaha takaraha aich pratyaharasya taparakaranaarthaha taparakarana samarthyat dirgha bhedena प्लुत भेदस्य ग्रहणं न भवति परंतु अयम तकारः आकारस्य तपरकरणार्थं नास्ति आकारस्य तपरकरणं नावश्यकं दीर्घभेदः सवर्णान् न गृह्णाति. So if you go to Kashika, hopefully, now I don't remember, but hopefully Kashika will say something like this. Look at this. Taparakaranam aijartham. The taparakaranam used in Vruddhiradaich is aich pratyaharartham, not for akarartham. Taparakaranam aijartham. And then it says tadapi paraha taparaha. So the one that comes after takara is also eligible for taparakaranam. By the way, these are the reasons why I actually like Kashika as compared to Siddhanta Kaumudi. In Siddhanta Kaumudi is just very brief summary. So when it comes to a clear understanding of the sutras, we don't have any other alternative but to go to Kashika. On the other hand, when you want to focus on Prakriya, Siddhanta Kaumudi is of extreme use. Therefore, one should never just be biased towards Kashika or Kaumudi. Sadly, I've seen people who will say, I only study Kashika or I only study Kaumudi. So it is okay at one level, at the beginning level. But in order to get a full-fledged understanding of a sutram, you also need an understanding from the Prakriya point of view and the Sutra point of view. The Kashika Vyakhya will be used for a Sutra level understanding. Kaumudi Vyakhya will be used for a Prakriya level understanding. So takara, so this is what we were talking about. Taparakaranam. Takaraha akarasya taparakaranartham nasti. Akarasya taparakaranam navashakam. Nahi dirgha bhedaha savarnan grinhati. And vruddhi pradeshaha vruddhi rechi ityevam adayaha. So sample example. Vruddhi rechi. Asmin sutre vruddhi iti shabdaha prayuktaha asti. In fact, vruddhi rechi is the sutram of vruddhi sandhi. So when you say eka plus eka, that becomes aika, ekaika, or vana plus oshadhi, vanaushadhi. We call it as vruddhi sandhi. Now you'll understand the real reason. the result of that sandhi is a vruddhi letter. Ek plus ek is ekaik. So I is coming as the result of that sandhi, which is a vruddhi letter. Vana plus oshadhi, vanaushadhi. So au is coming as a result of that sandhi, which is a vruddhi letter. So a sandhi in which a vruddhi letter comes as the final result is called vruddhi sandhi. That there is a question today in the exam, I think one of either for vruddhi or guna. Vruddhi sandhehe namni vruddhi iti shabdah kimartham asti. So this is the reason. The result is a vruddhi samnyaka word. So you get the name of the sandhi as vruddhi samni, and example of this particular vruddhi word. In fact, the example of the sutra that gives vruddhi sandhi is vruddhi rechi. Now there are a few questions over here. Is vruddhi a yoga rudha shabda? Possibly, but the problem over here is that in the language, the word vruddhi is not used for indication of a, I, o, and so on. The word vruddhi in the language is used in the meaning of growth, which is derived from the vardha dhatu. So as far as the actual word in the language is concerned, it is yogika itself. Whatever way it is used in the Vyakarana Shastra is irrelevant. In Vyakarana Shastra, you can use that word in whatever way you want. That does not define the usage in the loka, and the usage in the loka is the one that tells whether the word is yoga, yogika, yoga rudha, and so on. There is another question. Suggest one publisher with Kashika Vyakhya. There is one called Tara Publisher for Kashika. You can find if they have the, it's, I think if they have Hindi translation available. There are some English and Hindi translations of Kashika. At this stage, I'm going to be very honest, do not buy absolutely any books. If specifically you're beginner of the Ashtadhyayi, Sanskrit grammar, specifically Ashtadhyayi, only focus on what is taught in the class. Don't go and buy any books. But if you want, I think there are a few publishers. I'll find out and I'll send the message on the group. Ratnakar Mahoday, you want to say something?
Now that the word Vriddhi has come, and just one question, Acharya, other than that class topic. There is one word that is being used in many of the languages like Vardhanti. That is being said as it comes from Vriddha Dhatu. But in fact, how Vardhanti can come because it is an Atmanepadi. Though it, what's that? Though Ubhayapadi is there, it should have been Vardate, Vardete, Vardante. But somehow people are using Vardhanti, which is supposed to be what is that? As you said, Vriddhi for growth. But whereas people use that for death anniversary, how is that possible, Acharya?
Is it
There
used
was so
in
much of,
is it used in Sanskrit or is it used in any other language?
it's used in Marathi, it is used in Telugu, probably shayad
Then you
in
cannot
Hindi
apply
also.
rules of Sanskrit grammar to any of those languages. Unless it is used in
Oh,
Sanskrit, all your discussion is completely mute. So never
oh,
apply rules of Sanskrit language on any other language. Okay.
fine, Acharya. Thank you.
Any further questions? Agre gacchamaha. On the very same frequency, very same line, we have the next sutram, immediately next sutram of Ashtadhyayi, Prathamadhyasya Prathamapadasya Dvitiyam sutram, Adeng Gunaha. So now there is no need to keep the samnya first, so he flips the order. Adeng iti samni, Gunaha iti samnya. Samni is given first. Adeng cha guna samnya syat. ह्रस्व अवर्णः दीर्घः ए वर्णः तथा च दीर्घः ओ वर्णः. So remember, we had these come in pairs, and a and I, o and au. The second member of the pair is now called Vriddhi, and now the first member is being called Guna. So a is called Guna, a is called Guna, and o is called Guna. So these letters are called copy paste. Teaching is waste. So guna samyakaha bhavanti. No. Okay. So adeng gunaha a varnaha e varnaha तथा च ओ वर्णः एते त्रयः वर्णाः गुण सम्यकाः भवन्ति. अदेङ् गुणः Adeng is the samni. See, copy paste. I just copied without thinking. Samni is adeng. Samnya is gunaha. It is the adeng which is being called gunaha. Say just like the previous one, Adaich, Adeng is also Samasta Padam, At plus Eng. At indicates Hrasva Akaraha. Now you see this Taparakaranam is very valuable because it will block the other compartments of the train, Dirgha and Pluta. So At will be Hrasva Akaraha and Eng is the Eng Pratyahara, Eong. So that's Eg, which indicates A or includes A and O. There also Taparakaranam is used because A comes in Dirgha and Pluta flavors. So Dirgha might include Pluta. Similarly for O. So here we have A, Ta and Eng. And this Takara does double role. It allows a Taparakaranam on A and it also enables Taparakaranam on Eng. So Ata ityanena hrasva akaraha grihate. तकारः तपरकरणार्थः तपरकरणार्थः अतः ह्रस्वभेदेन दीर्घप्लुतयोः ग्रहणं न भवति एङ् इत्यनेन एङ् प्रत्याहारः इत्युक्ते ए औ इति द्वौ वर्णौ गृह्यते अत एङ् इत्यत्र विद्यमानः तकारः एङ् प्रत्याहारस्य तपरकरणार्थः अपि प्रयुज्यते अतः दीर्घभेदेन प्लुतभेदस्य ग्रहणं न भवति. So the immediate next sutram of Ashtadhyayi, Kashika will now say Taparakaranam tu iha sarvartham. Earlier it was saying Taparakaranam aijartham. Now it changes Taparakaranam sarvartham. Sarva means purvartham parartham. Ityasya krute api Taparakaranam. Eng ityasya krute api Taparakaranam. I think Nyasa will explain this. So ihatu sarvartham is very beautifully explained. Tatra hi aijartham. Tatra, in the previous sutram it was for aich. Ihatu sarvartham. In this sutra, akarartham engartham api. So for akara as well as for eng, taparakaranam is used for all the letters that will block the inclusion of dirgha a and it will block the inclusion of pluta, akara, ekara and okara. And then guna pradeshaha ad gunaha ityevamaadayaha. Just like the previous sutram, ad gunaha is the sutram for the guna sandhi. So maha plus isha becomes a mahesha. So again, a plus e, that's the guna varna that is coming over here. Surya plus udaya, suryodaya. That's O, which is a guna word which is coming over here. Guna samnyaka letter which is coming over here. So any sandhi that generates a guna samnyaka letter is called guna sandhi over here. The sutram is ad gunaha. So that completes the discussion of adeng gunaha. Purnima Bhagini.
Namaste, Mohdaya. I think there is a typo. A, O, iti, dau, varna. A, O.
I told you, no? Teaching is useless. Just copy and paste. Where is this? Give me 1 minute. A, O, iti, dau, varna. Again, in the flow of teaching, if by mistake I spoke au, it is A and O. So A and O is guna, I and au is vriddhi. Any other typing mistake? Okay. Srinivasa Mahoday.
नमस्ते महोदय. अत्र अदेङ् इति समस्तपदम् इति उक्तं किल, तर्हि तत्र इतरेतरद्वन्द्वसमासः
अत्र समाहारद्वन्द्वः क्रियते अतेङ् किमर्थमिति चेत् एकवचने प्रयोगः अस्ति किल, इतरेतरः भवति चेत् द्विवचन बहुवचनयोः प्रयोगः सम्भवति.
सः एव संशयः आसीत्. तर्हि अङ्गकारः तत्र नपुंसकलिङ्ग
नपुंसकलिङ्गे, तत्र नपुंसकलिङ्गे प्रयोगः आत् प्लस् ऐच् इत्यत्रापि नपुंसकलिङ्गे, अत्रापि नपुंसकलिङ्गे.
अस्तु, धन्यवादः.
ओके, अग्रे गच्छामः. So we completed T upadha vruddhiradeich adeng gunaha. The next samjna. Now this is basic stuff is gone. Now a little complex stuff starts. The next samjna is called samprasaranam. इग्यणः samprasaranam. प्रथमाध्यायस्य प्रथमपादस्य पञ्चचत्वारिंशत्तमं सूत्रम् इग्यणः samprasaranam. कः अर्थः? Understand that you have a yana pratyahara. Ya, ra, ya, va, ra, la. So ya, va, ra, la. In that sequence, there is a yana pratyahara. And there is another pratyahara called ikka. I, u, ru, lu. There is a pratyahara called ikka. There is a process which takes an ikka letter and converts it to yana letter. Very well known process, we call it yana sandhi. So for example, iti plus api, that ikara of iti gets converted to a yana letter yakara, which will become ityapi. So a process that takes ikka letter to yana letter is called yanadesha or yan sandhi. The reverse process, the one that takes a yana letter to an ikka letter, is called samprasarana. So yanaha ik, yanaha sthane yaha ik vidhiyate, saha ik samprasaranam namna jnayate. What are the examples? So if you take this particular dhatu, vacha, to speak, what is the kta pratyayanta form of vacha? It is ukta. What has happened? The va is converted to u. A reverse conversion has happened. In a yana sandhi, sadhu plus atra or bahu plus atra, u will get converted to a bahuatra. Here a reverse conversion is happening. A va is getting converted to u. Or for example, pracha is the dhatu. The lat lakara form is pruchhati. The ra becomes ru. So reverse of yanadesha is happening. This process where a yana vyanjan gets converted to an ik, the ik letter, that process or the letter itself is called samprasarana. So let us understand, there is some shastra aspects also over here. So yana iti varnasya sthane adesha rupena vihitaha ik iti varnaha samprasaranam namna jnayate. Who is the samprasaranam? It is the ikka letter that comes in place of yana is called samprasaranam. Ik yanaha samprasaranam. The padacheda tripadatmakam sutram ik yanaha samprasaranam. Yanaha iti uddesham. Now see the uddesha vidheya bhava is also very typical over here. Yanaha iti uddesham. It is samni asti. Ikka is also a samni. It is not the samnya that is being defined. Ikka is also a samni, but it is a vidheyam. It is not uddesham. And it is a vidheya not of this sutram. All that we are saying is, if there is some sutram in Ashtadhyayi that is converting a yana letter to an ikka letter, then such an ikka letter will be called samprasarana. This sutra itself is not doing any conversion. Please understand. The sutra is not saying convert yana to ikka. Whatever I mentioned, pracha to prichati or vacha to ukta, it is not this sutram that is doing the conversion. The actual conversion will be done by some other sutras of Ashtadhyayi. All that this sutra is saying is that when such a conversion has happened, the ikka letter that is generated out of that conversion will be called samprasarana. So the yana is the samni, it is the uddesha, and ikka, it is the samni of this sutram, but it is the vidheya because it has been generated from yana in some other sutra. So ikka is the vidheya, and obviously the samnya over here is samprasaranam. So ikka iti prakriyasu vidheya rupena prayujyate, परंतु अस्मिन् सूत्रे संज्ञा रूपेण इव तस्य निर्देशः अस्ति. So that is ikka. Yanaha iti shashti, that is the uddesham. Shashti indicates sthane, in place of. Remember the vibhaktis. So shashti yanaha sthane. ik iti prathama, that is the videya. So yanaha sthane yaha ikha, sorry, yanaha sthane yaha ikvarnaha kenachit sutrena vidhiyate saha ikvarnaha. So understand this. Yana is the sthani, ya, va, ra, la, four entities. Ika is a videya and adesha which is told by somebody else. It also consists of four letters I, U, Ru, Lu. So yatha sankhya sambandha. What do we mean by yana getting converted to ika? Yakarasya sthani ikaraha, vakarasya sthani ukaraha. So yaja become ishta, vacha becomes ukta, रेफस्य स्थाने ऋकारः, प्रच्छ becomes पृष्ठ, और ग्रह becomes गृहीत. रेफस्य स्थाने ऋकारः and लकारस्य स्थाने जायमानः लुकारः. This is called samprasaranam. So that ika letter I, U, Ru, Lu is called samprasaranam. And let me remind this once again. This is not a vidhi sutram. इक् इत्यस्य अत्र साक्षात् विधानं कृतं नास्ति. अन्यस्मिन् विधिसूत्रे विधीयमानः यः इक् वर्णः तस्य अत्र केवलं निर्देशः क्रियते. सः इक् वर्णः संप्रसारणम् इति नाम्ना ज्ञायते इति अस्य सूत्रस्य अर्थः. संप्रसारणप्रदेशाः संप्रसारणस्य इत्येवम् आदयः. So this sutram 63139, it says do a dirghadesha on samprasarana. The meaning of this sutram 63139 samprasaranasya is samprasaranasya dirghaha bhavati. What does it mean? It means look at the previous step in the prakriya. If there is an ika letter which is generated from yana letter, so not random ika letter. Random ika letter is not called samprasaranam. I am specifically telling this because in the previous sutras, any a, I, o is called vriddhi. Any a, o is called guna. So random akara, aikara, ukara have the vriddhi samnya. Random akara, ekara, okara have the guna samnya. But that's not the case over here. Random ik letter is not called samprasarana. That ik letter which is generated as an adesha of yan letter by some other sutra in the previous step of the prakriya. Previous is not necessarily immediately previous. It can be 2, 3, 5 steps anywhere in the prakriya basically. Such an ik letter is called samprasarana, and this sutram says make a dirgha of that ik letter. So the ik letter will be rasva ikara, it will become dirgha ikara. Ik letter is rasva ukara, it will become dirgha ukara, and so on. Understand? Yanaha sthane yaha ik vidhiyate. So ik is a vidhiyamana ik. So it will not do savarna grahanam. So in place of yana, only rasva varna is going to be given as the adesha. That rasva varna in some prakriyas where samprasaranasya sutram is applicable will be converted to dirgha. So that's the story of igyanaha samprasaranam. Any questions? There's a question which says igyanaha iti samasa asti. No, it is just two words. Look at the padacheda. Ik yanaha samprasaranam. Yanaha yaha ik saha samprasaranam. And the question is, why is ikka in front? Probably you could have done yanaha ik samprasaranam also. That minor things I don't know, or at least not commented anywhere in the vyakhyanas. All that but it's not a samasta pada. It's just three words together. रेशमा जी.
Namaste, Mohoday. My question is that if ik has to be defined in the first place, then in the example like vach becomes ukta. So the vach, the ver of the vach, is that also defined somewhere from yana to ik?
No. Vacha is the dhatu, right? Vacha is simply vakara that appears in the dhatu. So all
Correct.
that we are saying is any vakara, when it gets converted to ukara, that ukara will be called samprasarana. That's all that we are saying.
Okay, so for yana, it can be any yana, but for ik, sorry, I just got confused in that sentence. Yana sthanaya
See,
ika
let me
vidhiyate.
explain. Yana is not called samprasarana. There is some yana letter to start with. It may not be generated from yana sandhi. It can be any yana letter. So for example, in the vacha dhatu, va is the yana letter. Now there is a sutram in Ashtadhyayi which will convert the va of vacha dhatu to ukara. So one step in the prakriya will be vacha will become ucha. Va will be converted to ukara. That ukara is now generated from a vakara, so it is called samprasarana. Clear or still not clear?
Yeah, it is clear.
Okay. Any okay. There is a question, ik varnas have a name as samprasarana. So that is correct. And ik letter is written over here. Ik varnasya samprasaranam iti samnya bhavati. See, ik varnaha samprasaranam namna jnayate. So the ik letter, not random ik letter. So for example, if you take Neelesha, the ik present in Neelesha is not called samprasaranam. It has to be generated from a yana letter and then it will be called samprasaranam. Chandramouli Mahoday.
Sir, in terms of sutra being unambiguous or without any confusion, unique meaning has to be derived, especially in the case of the Taparakarana art and things like that. How do you delineate between a Panchamyartha and Taparakarana? Art can be also as a fifth case, right?
That is always, I mean, that's a common problem in every language, right? I mean, for example, Ramaha, is it Subanta or Tinganta? How do you know? Unless you know the context. I mean, there was a question in the exam, right? Ramaha is a valid Tinganta and it is a valid Subanta. So ambiguity is at the heart of every language. So that ambiguity can only be resolved from the context. So Ramaha gacchati versus Vayam Ramaha. If you take the two different sentences, you will understand this to distinguish. Exactly in the same way, the context over here is the Vyakhyanas. The Vyakhyanas.
Okay, we go back to Vyakhyana. Okay.
Vyakhyana to Vishesha Pratipatti. That's why I taught it very first.
Okay.
Vyakhyana to Vishesha Pratipatti. And another point, see this Alpaksharam Asandigdham Saravad Vishwato Mukham and so on is basically a general set of rules or general guidelines which are applicable for most of the sutras. So for example, in classroom, we say you should not stay absent. Is a general indication to all the students. Does it mean that every student is present in every class? Probably not. There are some problems. Some people are absent in 1 or 2 or 5 classes, but majority classes they are present. That's exactly the analogy over here, that majority of the sutras will follow Alpaksharatvam, Asandigdhatvam, Vishwato Mukham and so on. There always be few cases here and there. Sudhavalli ji. Sudhavalli ji.
Namaskara, Mahoday.
Namaste.
My doubt is, when these ek letters from the n letters, is it using this samprasarana? Can we convert this n into ek wherever possibility is there? That is it the right of the right to convert from n to ek whenever there is a possibility using this samprasaranam?
This samprasaranam is always only a samnya. It is not telling you to convert yan to ika. Yan to ika conversion will be given by other sutras in Ashtadhyayi. Okay, so there will be a sutra which will say vacha becomes ucha. And then you notice in that sutram that va is becoming u, so let's call it samprasaranam, like that. But this sutra is not doing any conversion. Clear?
Dhanyawad.
Anything else? Now there is a lot about this Igyana Samprasaram that I have to mention. We still want 30 more minutes for this class, but there is a lot of interesting thing. This is just a basic surface. There is some interesting Shastra Vishaya of Igyana Samprasaranam that I want to discuss right now. Pay attention. What did we say? Yanaha sthane prayujyamanaha ik. Saha ik varnaha yaha yan varnasya sthane prayujyate prakriyayam. Now this particular sentence, yanaha sthane yaha ik vidhiyate, it actually has two meanings. Very beautiful and deep shastra over here. Pay attention. यणः स्थाने यः इक् विधीयते इत्यस्य अर्थद्वयं वर्तते. First, which I have already told you right now, यण् वर्णस्य स्थाने यः इक् वर्णः प्रक्रियायाः पूर्वसोपाने विहितः अस्ति सः संप्रसारणसंज्ञकः. In the previous step of the prakriya, some yana got converted to some ik. Now in the current step of the prakriya, I already have an ik and I know that this ik is generated from a yana. This ik is samprasarana. And the example of that particular usage is samprasaranasya. I already taught this sutra, I mentioned this sutra on the previous slide. Yan varnasya sthane yaha ik varnaha purvasopane vihitaha tasya idanim dirghaha bhavati. In this particular sutra, samprasaranasya, an existing ik letter who has got the term called samprasaranam is now going to become dirgha. But interestingly, this is not the only meaning. There is another meaning that is accepted in the Shastras. The meaning is yan varnasya sthane yaha ik varnaha prakriyayaha prakruta sopane vidhasyate saha api samprasarana samyakaha. The ik letter which will come in place of yan, not which has come, which will come in place of yana, is also called samprasaranam before that ik letter even exists. So before this ik letter even exists, if you know that there is going to be an ik letter that comes in place of a certain yana letter, it will be called samprasarana. Now, why such a convoluted definition is used? Because it is this definition that allows us to frame some very interesting sentences. So with this particular definition, now we can say vacha dhatoho vakarasya samprasaranam bhavati. Look at this statement very carefully. Vacha dhatoho vakarasya samprasaranam bhavati. It is still vakara. And we are saying samprasaranam bhavati, no cha samprasaranam bhavishyati. Means what? There will be an ukara coming in place of vakara. So what if this particular definition would not have been there, you cannot say vachadhatoho vakarasya samprasaranam bhavati. You can only say vachadhatoho vakarasya sthane ukaraha vidhiyate saha ukaraha samprasarana samnika bhavati. Instead of writing such a long statement, we can now say vachadhatoho vakarasya samprasaranam bhavati. The reason being, now the samprasaranam is also used for an ik letter which will appear in the current step or in the next step. So there is a sutram which says trehe samprasaranam cha in 5.2. This sutram says tri shabdasya yan varnasya sthane. So the repha of three, the yan varna in three is repha. In place of that repha, yaha kaschana ik varnaha sthapaniyaha tasya samprasaranam bhavati means ik varnaha sthapaniyaha. Pay very close attention. In this sutram trehe samprasaranam cha, you cannot use the previous samnya, the previous interpretation. The previous interpretation would be rephasya sthane rukaraha purvameva vihitaha. But you are actually saying three. So there is no rukara. It only has repha. So when you say trehe samprasaranam cha, you are actually saying in the place of repha of three, place a letter which will be called samprasaranam. Ayam bhavi ikvarnaha api samprasarana samyakaha bhavati. So this way, the ik letter that is already present from a yana letter is also called samprasarana, and ik letter which will be created is also called samprasarana. So etad, and this particular type of samnya is a very unique case where a samnya is given for an entity which doesn't exist yet. So etadrishi samnya ya वर्णस्य सिद्धेः पूर्वम् अपि तस्य कृते प्रयुज्यते. भाविनी संज्ञा नाम्ना ज्ञायते. Bhavini means futuristic, the one that will happen. So Bhavini samya namna jnayate. Samprasaranam is a Bhavini samya. Bhashyakara explains this. He says, Bhavini khalu asya samya abhipreta. In 1.1.45, Igyana Samprasaranam, Bhashyakara explains that this is not a normal samya, it is a Bhavini samya. Bhavini khalu asya samya abhipreta. Bhavini means the one that will happen, futuristic. So Bhavini khalu asya samya abhipreta. Saha ikvarnaha yanaha sthane bhavati yasya abhinirvruttasya samprasaranam iti samya bhavishyati. That ikvarna will come in place of yana, whose samya after its existence will be called samprasaranam. In order to explain this entire meaning, you can simply say yanaha samprasaranam bhavati means saha ikvarnaha yasya anantaram samprasaranavit samya bhavati saha atra agantum shaknoti. And Bhashyakara doesn't stop here. Bhashyakara gives a very beautiful real life analogy so that you can actually appreciate that Bhavini Samyas are not just theoretical concepts in Vyakarana Shastra, but Bhavini Samyas are extremely real concepts in real life. Let's go to Igyana Samprasaranam. This is the beauty of this course. If you just learn Kaumudi or Kashika or Laghu Kaumudi, you will never get a chance to learn these things. These are some of the gems that are scattered, sometimes in Nyasa, sometimes in Balamanorma, Tattva Bodhini. Here I am explaining a beautiful gem from Mahabhashya. So in this course, this is exactly what we are going to take. Saram Grahitavyam Apasya Phalgu. We are going to take those gems like a Hamsa from various commentaries. So here in the Igyana Samprasaranam, here is Bhashyakara explains, Evam tarhi bhavini iyam samya vidnyasyate. And then he says, this bhavini samya is actually seen in the real life. If you take a thread and if you go to say a weaver, the one who stitches cloths, if you take a thread and go to a weaver and say, make or weave a sari out of this, or make or weave a shirt out of this. Now look at your own statement. You're saying stitch or weave a sari out of this. The weaver, the cloth maker is going to say, what kind of statement is this? If it is a sari, it is already weaved. You don't have to weave it. And if it is a thread, then you don't call it a sari. So that's exactly what is written in the Bhashya over here. Kaschit kanchit tantuvayam aha asya sutrasya shakatam vaya. Take this thread, take this sutra. Sutra is not Panini Sutra. Take this thread and create a cloth, a sari out of it. Vaya ityukte, to weave or to stitch. So asya sutrasya shakatam vaya. Saha pashyati yadi shakataha navatavyaha. If you're already calling it sari, then stitching work is done. You don't have to stitch it anymore. And if you're calling it stitching, then it cannot be a sari because it is the thread that is going to get weaved. So athavatavyaha na shakataha shatakaha. Athava saha pashyati yadi shatakaha na vatavyaha athavatavyaha na shatakaha shatakaha vatavyashta iti vipratisheddham. They are contrary. Exactly in the same way. When you say kasyachit samprasaranam bhavati, same contradiction is appearing over here. In the first definition, we say samprasaranam means what? It is already done. Then bhavati ityasya kaha artha. And if you want to say samprasaranam bhavati, then you cannot use the word samprasaranam. So this is exactly the dilemma that you can also see in the real life. And the solution in the real life is exactly the bhavini samya. The customer then says, no, what I mean is that you create this thread you arrange this thread in such a way that the result will be shatika and shatakaha, and then that shatika is what I'm referring right now. So that's exactly what we also do in this particular sutram. So Bhashyakara explains this. Bhavini khalu asya samya abhipreta. सः मन्ये वातव्यः यस्मिन्नुते शाटक इत्येतद् भवति. The one that will be created after the act of stitching is the shataka which I am referring right now. Evam iha api. Just like that here. Saha ikvarnaha yanaha sthane bhavati yasya abhinirvruttasya samprasaranam ityesha samnya bhavishyati. So that yan letter, that ik letter which will be created later on and will be called samprasaranam is already being called samprasaranam. So in this way, Bhavini samnya is not just some ruksha concept, dry concept in the Vyakarana Shastra. It is actually used in the loke. So loke api etad lakshyate. So this is exactly the essence, the story around this Bhavini samnya. And this kind of discussion is somewhat complex. So what some other grammarians do is they take a simpler path. They say, instead of doing all this Bhavini samnya and all that, let me say the process is also called samprasaranam. So not just the ik letter, but the process of conversion of yana to ik, that activity, that transformation is also samprasaranam. So for example, when you say trehe samprasaranam cha, you're actually saying do a process in which a tree will be converted to through. So an ikara will be converted, sorry, repha will be converted to rukara. So the process is also called samprasaranam. That is also an acceptable approach. So kechana vayyakaranaha yan varnasya ik varne parivartanasya prakriyam api samprasaranam namna eva svikurvanti tadapi doshaya nasti. So trehe samprasaranam cha means tri shabdasya samprasarana prakriya jayate iti arthaha. Any questions so far? Okay. Agre gacchamaha. The next part is somewhat easy. There is no Vishesha Shastra Vishaya. So we are done with Adeng Gunaha Igyana Samprasaranam. Only 3 sutras are pending. Bahuganavaturati Sankhya, Shnanta Shat and Daticha. But before we go to these 3 sutras, there is a little bit of discussion that I want to do. That discussion will be used in the study of the sutras. Very simple discussion. I'm going to go super fast. There is a pratyaya called vatup pratyaya. It is a tadhita pratyaya. Many of you are probably aware of it. Vatup is a tadhita pratyaya, and this pratyaya is used to create only 5 pratipadiks. So vatup iti pratyayasya adharena pancha pratipadikani siddhyanti. Sutram is this. Yattadetebhya parimani vatup. So this is the vatupa pratyaya. It is a tadhita pratyaya. And with this vatupa pratyaya, there are 5 pratipadikas that are generated. Yavat, very well known words. Yavat, tavat, etavat, kiyat, and iyat. Now I expect all of you to already know all these words. So I'm not going to spend time on this slide. If you don't know, go back to this slide. All the examples, meanings and so on are given. But these 5 words, yavata, tavata, etavata, kiyata and iyata, are along with their pullinga versions, strilinga versions and napumsakalinga versions, are generated from vatup pratyaya. So take this data point. Just remember it. Let's move on. There is another pratyaya, again a tadhita pratyaya called dati. The pratyaya is called dati. This pratyaya may not be familiar to you, but this dati pratyaya is used to create only one word in Sanskrit grammar called kati. How many? So remember, in the vatup pratyaya section, we saw kiyat. Now in the dati pratyaya section, we are seeing kati. So there is only one word, again very familiar word, all of you are expected to know this. Kati iti shabdaha dati iti pratyasya adharena siddhyati. So kati I have given the meaning and so on. This is always a bahuvachananta shabda. You can never say kati asti. You have to say kati santi. Trishu lingeshu samanani rupani bhavanti. These are the general grammar aspects. I have also given the difference between kati and kiyata all of you are already expected to know this. This has nothing to do with Ashtadhyayi. This is a basic grammar concept. So I'm going to skip this slide and move on. If you want to revise your basics, go and look at this slide. So what did I say? One is the Vatupa Pratyaya, which has 5 words. Remember this. Second is the Dati Pratyaya, which has only 1 word. Remember this. Register these 2 points and then we will move to the next slide. On this next slide, I am going to give you a general description of the Sankhya Samnya and the Shat Samnya. So if you go to the list of sutras, the 3 sutras that are remaining, 1 sutra teaches the Sankhya Samnya and the remaining 2 sutras teach the Shat Samnya. Snoshnanta Shat and Daticha. Both of these teach the Shat Samnya. So Sankhya Samnya and Shat Samnya. Let me give you a brief walkthrough for both of these and then we will take sutras and then we will stop. So Sankhya Samnya. In Ashtadhyayi, there are 3 types of words that are called Sankhya. So Sankhya iti 3 prakarakaha shabdaha santi. First, ekam, dvi, tri, chatur and so on. So all the numerics 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so on, these are all automatically Sankhyas in Vyakarana also. So in the spoken Sanskrit, they are already Sankhyas. But in Vyakarana also these are Sankhyas. And etesham krute ashtadhyayam pruthak sutram nasti. Parantu loka vyavaharaha eva pramanam. So for example, there is a sutram which says Sankhyayaha vidharthe dha. It says attach a dha pratyaya to anything that is called a Sankhya. Now we see words like ekadha, dvidha, tridha, chaturdha, panchadha and so on. So this dha pratyaya is attached to a word which is called Sankhya, and even if Ashtadhyayi does not have a direct sutram which will say एक द्वि त्रि चतुर इत्येतेषां संख्या सम्या भवति इत्यस्य कृते अष्टाध्याय्यं सूत्रं नास्ति, तथापि अयं धा प्रत्ययः एक द्वि त्रि चतुर इत्येतैः सह अवश्यं प्रयुक्तः दृश्यते, अतः एक द्वि त्रि एतेषाम् अपि संख्या इति संज्ञया व्याकरणशास्त्रे अवश्यं निर्देशः भवति. So there is a question in the homework that which sutram or how do you know that eka dvi are called sankhyas in Vyakarana Shastra? The answer is you have a sutra like this where the dha pratyay is applicable to eka dvi and so on. So etesham krute ashtadhyayam pruthak sutram nasti parantu loka vyavahara atra pramanam. Ekadha, dvidha, tridha, this is the loka vyavahara. So this is one type of words that becomes samya. Then there is another 2 words, bahu and gana. These are also called Sankhya. So the word Bahu, when it is used in the meaning of Anekam, so Bahu Chhatraha, Bahavaha Chhatraha Santi, or Bahavaha Tarakaha Santi, that kind of usage, Anekam, it is called Sankhya. The word Bahu is also used in the meaning of Vipulam, Nadyam Bahujalam Vartate, but that is not the Sankhya. So vipulam अस्मिन् अर्थे संख्या इति संज्ञा नास्ति, अनेकम इति अर्थे बहु इत्यस्य संख्या संज्ञा वर्तते. सो वृक्षे बहूनि फलानि सन्ति, अत्र संख्या संज्ञा अस्ति, परन्तु नद्यां बहु जलं वर्तते, अत्र संख्या संज्ञा नास्ति. So this is about the bahu word. In the same way, there is another word called gana. It is used in the meaning of gananam, count. इत्यस्मिन् अर्थे संख्या इति संज्ञा अस्ति, परन्तु संघ, a group इत्यस्मिन् अर्थे संख्या इति संज्ञा नास्ति. सो तारकाणां गणः कर्तुं न शक्यः. You cannot count the stars. तारकाणां गणः कर्तुं न शक्यः. So here the word gana is used to indicate a count. So it is a sankhya samyaka word. But if you say ayam samskritasya chhatranam ganaha, so then this word gana is used in the artha of samuha, a group, a sangha. So then the gana word does not get the sankhya samya. So this way, eka, dvi, tri, chatur are all sankhya samyaka words, and bahu and gana are sankhya samyaka in certain meanings. and all the vatup pratyayanta words, that's the reason I gave that data point, yavat, tavat, etavat, kiyat, iyat, those 5 words, and dati pratyayanta kati word, so that's the only one word, all these are sankhya samyakas. So yavat, tavat, etavat, kiyat, iyat and kati, ete shabdaha sankhya samyakaha, sankhya vachakaha santi. So Sankhya is a term in Ashtadhyayi. I'm going to teach you sutra right on the next slide. But before that, understand Sankhya is a grammatical term, is a Vyakarana Shastra samnya in Ashtadhyayi. And who is called Sankhya? All the numbers are called Sankhya. Then the Vatupa Pratyayanta and Dati Pratyayanta words are called Sankhya, and there are only 6 of them. And the Bahu and Gana, these 2 words are called Sankhya in specific meanings. So that's about the term called Sankhya. There is another term in Ashtadhyayi called shat. This is a Vyakarana samnya, not to be confused with the number 6. Just like the way Vriddhi in the language means something different, Vriddhi in grammar means something different. In the same way, shat as the number is different. In Vyakarana Shastra, there is a samnya called shat. And what is this shat samnya? Actually, very easy. Pay a little attention. The numbers from 5 onwards up to 19. So Panchan, Shash, Saptan, Ashtan, Navan, Dashan, and then Ekadashan onwards up to Navadashan. Essentially, all the numbers which end in Nakara or all the words which end in Shakara. So there is only one Pratipadika which ends in a Shakara, which is a Shash, which is the Pratipadika for Shat. And then there are a bunch of words starting from Panchan up to Navadashan. All of them end in Nakara. So any Pratipadika which is already a Sankhya, so it is a Sankhya Vachaka Pratipadika, which ends in a Nakara or Shakara is called Shat. A specific samnya is given because there are prayojanas of that. We are going to see those prayojanas in upcoming classes. But it's called Shat. And then the specific word called Kati, which is generated using the Dati Pratyaya, is also called Shat. So I know it is too much to take in just one slide, but there is a reason I represent everything in this slide. We are now going to look at the same thing from the sutra point of view, and then it will become very clear. So the next sutram that we are going to study is Bahugana Vatudati Sankhya. Now see, this is very easy to understand. Bahugana Vatudati Sankhya. So Bahu Gana Vatu, which indicates the Vatupa Pratyaya, which means those 5, and Dati, which indicates Dati Pratyaya. All these are called Sankhya. So when I say Pratyaya is the Sankhya, it means the Pratyayanta word is Sankhya. So Bahu Gana Vatu Dati Ete Sankhya Samnyaha Syuhu. Bahu Gana Vatu Dati is a single pada, Sankhya is the second pada. Bahugana Vatudati is the Uddesham, Sankhya is the Vidheyam, or is the same as the Samnya. Bahugana Vatudati iti Samaharadvandvaha, Bahu cha Ganaha cha Vatu cha Dati cha Esham Samaharaha. So Bahu iti Shabdaha, Gana iti Shabdaha. So the first 2 are the verbatim words, Bahu and Gana. Vatu and Dati are the Pratyas. So Vatu Pratyayanta Shabdaha and Dati Pratyayanta Shabdaha, only one called Kati. So Dati Pratyayanta Shabdaha, ete sarve Sankhya Samyakaha bhavanti. For Bahu and Gana, only specific meanings. So Kashika clarifies this. Bahu Gana Shabdayoho Vaipulye Sanghe cha atra grahanam nasti. Bahu Shabda when used in the meaning of Vipulam and Gana Shabda when used in the meaning of Sangha, atra grahanam nasti is not to be included over here, but the other Sankhya Vachake Arthe tu avashyam atra asti. Same thing is explained in Nyasa. Bahu Shabdaha ayam Sankhya Vachanaha asti Vaipulya Vachanaha api. Gana Shabdaha Sankhya Vachanaha asti Sangha Vachanaha api. So for each of them, two meanings exist. तत्र यौ वैपुल्यसङ्घवचनौ तयोः इह ग्रहणं नास्ति, संख्यावाचिनोः एव अत्र ग्रहणं, तयोः तु एषा संख्या संज्ञा विधीयते. So this way, bahu and gana in specific meanings are called sankhya. Vatu pratyayantani pancha pratipadikani yavat tavat etavat kiyat iyat. All these are called sankhya. Dati pratyayanta kati shabdaha is also called sankhya. There is a typing mistake. Sanya samyakani sankhya samyakaha. So is also called sankhya. So in this way, sankhya is three types of words. Ekam, dve, trini, and so on. There is no sutra for it. Bahu and gana only in specific meanings. And the vatu pratyanta and dati pratyanta shabda are sankhyas. Sankhya pradeshaha sankhya vamshyena ityevam adayaha. So a sample example where the sankhya word is used is sankhya vamshyena. And one final point, once again the same thing, in fact, स्मर्तव्यम् एक द्वि त्रि आदीनामपि संख्या इति संज्ञा अस्ति एव, तस्य कृते अष्टाध्याय्यां किमपि विशिष्टं सूत्रं न वर्तते. There is a question over here. Sankhya is a dharma and 1, 2, 3 are sankhya vachakas. So how sankhya is also samgya? So the answer to that is sankhya is a dharma and so on. You are simply talking it in the loka, in the language. Specifically when it comes to grammar, the numbers 1, 2, 3 are called sankhya as a grammatical term. This question comes up because you are overlapping the laukika sankhya word with the vyakarana sankhya word. Even though meanings are very similar, in the vyakarana shastra, it is simply a sa dot kha ya a. So that's the anupurvi, which is sankhya, and 1, 2, 3, which have the dharma of sankhya in the loka, are also getting the sankhya samnya. So eka, dvi, tri adinamapi sankhya iti samnya asti in the vyakarana shastra. Let's go to the next two sutras, probably 5 to 6 more minutes. Simple sutras. Shnanta, Shat and Daticha. These are the two sutras that will give the Shata Samnya. Remember on the previous slide, the Shata Samnya is given for two entities. One is the Shakaranta and Nakaranta Sankhyavachaka words, the numeric words, Panchan, Shash, Saptan and so on. So the first sutram, Shnanta, Shat, is for this Panchan, Shash, Saptam and so on. And the next sutram, Dati Cha, is for this Kati. So two lines, two separate sutras Maharshi has given. So the first sutram is Shnanta Shata. Very simple sutram actually. Shanta and Nanta. Sh plus N. Shtutva has happened and Shno has been generated. But otherwise it is Shakaranta and Nakaranta. So Shnanta Shata iti padachhedaha. Sankhya iti anuvartate. Stoshnanta Sankhya, any Sankhya Samyaka word which is Shakaranta and Nakaranta. So Shakarantaha cha Nakaranta, Shakarantaha Nakarantaha va Sankhya Samyaka Shabdaha is going to get the term called Shata. So Saha Sankhya Vachaka Shabdaha Yaha Shakarantaha asti uta Nakarantaha asti. The Shnanta, it is generated by Shaha cha Naha cha. Again, it is a dvandva samasa, shaha cha naha cha, and anta is used at the end. So dvandvante vidyamanam padam pratyekam abhisambadhyate. So sha anta and na anta, the way to write it in the dvandva samasa is shnanta. And then there will be shtutva, so na will become a na. So shnanta shata. So saha sankhya vachakaha shabdaha yaha shakarantaha asti nakarantaha va asti. Asya Shata iti samnya bhavati. Essentially, if you enumerate everything, it is simply Panchan, Shash, Saptan, Ashtan, and so on up to Navadashan. All these are Shat Samyaka words. So Shakarantaha, Nakarantaha cha Sankhya-vachak Shabdaha Shat iti namna jnayante. Asya udaharanam Shat Pradeshaha Shadbhyo Luk ityevam adayaha. And remember, there is a Shata which is a number, which is different. Shata is a Vyakarana Samnya, which is different. And ironically, the number 6 also gets the samnya shat. So shat iti sankhya api shat samnyaka avashyam asti. Why? Because the shasha pratipadika is included over here. But otherwise there is no relation. So shat as a number is different, shat as a samnya is different. There is a question over here, but I'll take that later on. Let me just take the next sutram on the shatta samnya. Snoshranta shatta and dati cha. Again, very simple sutram. Dati cha. Dati iti avibhaktikaha nirdeshah asti. Or napamsakalinga ekvachan. Because if you want to take it pullinga, you say dati hi. But it is dati, so it is either napumsakalinga or avibhaktika. Panini Maharshi does not prefer to use a vibhakti. This is called sautraha nirdeshaha, or this is called his way of expressing things. So avibhaktikaha nirdesha, or you say napumsakalinga ekvachanam, simple. So dati cha, dati pratyayantaha shabdaha api shat samyakaha bhavati. So saha so sankhya and shat come as an anuvritti. Saha dati pratyayantaha sankhya samyakaha shabdaha shat samyakaha api bhavati. So dati sankhya is the samni and shat is the samnya. That shat comes as an anuvritti. So dati pratyayantaha sankhya samyakaha kati iti shabdaha. We have seen it is already given by bahugana vatu dati sankhya. So dati pratyayantaha sankhya samyakaha kati iti shabdaha. Atra shat samyakaha api asti. षट् प्रदेशाः षड्भ्यो लुक इत्येवम् आदयः. So there is a question over here. Does the word kati get both the samnyas shat as well as sankhya? That is correct. That is the exact reason why the sankhya is being taken as an anuvritti. So anuvritti sahitam sutram would be dati sankhya shatcha. I'm writing. Dati sankhya shatcha. The sankhya vachaka word generated from the dati pratyaya is shat samyaka. So remember the sequence. Bahugana vatudati sankhya, shnanta shat and dati cha. The sankhya is taken as an anuvritti in shnanta shat and dati cha both. So shata samya is always a subset of sankhya samya. Sankhya is all numbers and shatta is a specific shakaranta and nakaranta numbers. That's the shatta samya. And then kati word is also shatta samya. So that two cases are being given in two separate sutras, shnanta shatta and dati cha. And this shat samya is always a subset of samya. Subset in the sense only some amount of samya vachaka words will get the shat samya. Therefore, the sankhya word comes as an anuvritti in both the next sutras. So that's basically shat pradeshaha shadbhyo luk ityevam adayaha. So there we mostly end the class. There is one question over here. वैपुल्यस्य नदी विषये उक्तवान् आसीत् अन्यत्रापि वैपुल्यं संख्या संज्ञा न गृह्यते वा. सो वैपुल्यम इत्यस्मिन् अर्थे बहु इति शब्दः संख्या संज्ञकः नास्ति. That's all that we are saying. विपुल is never a संख्या संज्ञा. So the word विपुल इत्यस्य संख्या संज्ञा कदापि नास्ति. बहु इति शब्दस्य विपुलम् अस्मिन् अर्थे संख्या संज्ञा नास्ति इति आशयः. Any other questions? Okay, so there is one very small component, again a Shastra Vishaya, very interesting. I can actually allow you to read that, but let me take it. In fact, let me just explain it and then you read what is there on the slide. I'll not spend time. I'll just give you a hint and we'll stop. Look at these three sutras. Bahugana Vatudati Sankhya, Shnanta Shata, and Dati Cha. There is this dati word over here and there is already a dati word over here, and these three sutras are in sequence 1123, 1124, 1125. So the question is there a real need of repeating the dati word? You can just use the dati word as an anuvritti. And if you use dat, so for example, what you do is you take the dati word as an anuvritti in the next sutram. So all that you want to do is dati ityasya api shat samnya bhavet. So take dati word as an anuvrutti in shnanta shat, which means dati cha sutram itself is not needed. So you can actually reduce one sutra and you can say bahugana vatu dati sankhya ityasmad dati iti amshaha shnanta shat ityatra anuvartate, because of which the shata samnya is now given to the shakaranta, nakara and nakaranta sankhya-vachaka words and also to the dati word. So that's exactly what is written on the slide over here. So shakar बहुगणवतुडति संख्या इत्यत्र डति शब्दः वर्तते, अतः तस्य अनुवृत्तिः अग्रे कर्तुं शक्यते, तादृशं क्रियते चेत् डति च इति सूत्रमेव अनावश्यकम्. So see how the commentators, Bhashyakara or others think through minor words, and here in the 22nd class of our course we have successfully gotten rid of one sutram by saying it is anavashyaka. So dati cha iti sutrameva na avashyakam. This is just logical exercise. We are not going to renumber sutras or we are not going to delete that sutra from Sutra Patha and so on. This is the beauty of Vyakarana Shastra, small ways in which you can actually optimize the stuff. So even if we say there is alpaksharatvam filled everywhere, you can still find cases where you can do some kind of magical stuff in the Sutra Patha. So that's it, samapayamaha. Again, as I mentioned yesterday, today's class was also a little longer. From next class, it will be hopefully 1 hour or 1 hour 15 minutes. So T, upadha, vriddhi, vriddhi, guna, samprasaranam, sankhya and shat. All these are samnyas that we studied today. The sheet is already updated. Here is the homework. I'm very happy some attendees have already completed previous homework. So faster than me, so happy. So संक्षेपेण टिप्पणीं लिखत, संक्षेपेण टिप्पणीं लिखत. आदैचित्यत्र तपर्करणं, वतुप प्रत्ययः, भाविनी संज्ञा, संख्या संज्ञा and षट् संज्ञा. Write some 10-15 lines of note and then एकवाक्येन उत्तरत. Some questions are little complex. Most of them I have answered in the class today. So for example, guna sandehe namni guna iti shabda kimartham asti, sankhya iti shabdena ekadaya sankhyaha api gृह्यन्ते ityasya kim pramanam and so on. Most of the stuff I have already explained in today's class. So that's all. Samapayamaha. Agrima saptahe niyamita rupena kakshadvayam bhavishyati. So here is what we plan to study in the next week. Savaranyam. We are going to study only 4 sutras in the next class about the Savaranyam, and then we are going to study a bunch of sutras in the class after that. These are the samnyas useful for the prakriya. So prakriyopayoginyah samnyaha. So that's the plan for the next class. Any questions, comments? No raised hands. Samapayamaha. Agrima saptahe niyamita rupena kakshadvayam bhavishyati. Reshma ji, you have a question.
Yeah, namaste. The question is that there is one matuk pratyay, which we use like iman and all. So that in that also sometimes the ma is getting converted to her, and this vatuk pratyay and that they are entirely different. Is
Very
that
good.
correct?
I actually like these kind of questions. There is a reason I was expecting finally somebody asked this question. So that is originally matup pratyay and makarasya vakaradeshah krutah asti. So that's altogether different. Bhagavat, for example, or Lakshmivat, for example. So that vatup is different. This vatup is only for the 5 words that I mentioned. Okay. Anything else? Samapayamaha. अष्टाध्यायी जगन्माता यस्य चित्तात् समुत्थिता वेदानामुपकाराय तस्मै पाणिनये नमः. शब्द ब्रह्म समाराध्य कृतवान्यो विलक्षणं सर्वाश्चर्यमिदं शास्त्रं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः. येन धौतागिरः पुंसां विमलैः शब्दवारिभिः तमश्चाज्ञानजं भिन्नं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः. धन्यवादः.